Hey, Kev, you there?
Damo, are you there?
I'm here, man.
It's the two of us.
Who else is on? This is Gayla. Okay. You got it. I'll mute it right now.
I'd like to call this meeting of the legislature to order and ask Legislator Tom McKevitt to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Mike, could you please call the roll?
Thank you. Deputy Presiding Officer Howard Copel. Alternate Presiding Officer Denise Ford. Legislator Sela Bino. Thank you. Legislator Carrier Solage.
Here.
Thank you. Legislator Deborah Muley.
Here.
Legislator C. William Gaylor III.
Present.
Thank you. Legislator Vincent Muscarella.
Here.
Legislator Ellen Birnbaum.
Here.
Legislator Delia DeRigi Witten. Legislator James Kennedy. Legislator Thomas McKevitt. Legislator Laura Schaefer. Legislator John Ferretti. Legislator Rosemarie Walker. Legislator Joshua Lafazan.
Here.
Thank you. Legislator Stephen Rhodes. Minority Leader Kavan Abrahams. Okay, and Presiding Officer. Thank you. Presiding Officer Richard Nicolello. We have a quorum, sir.
Thank you. Today we have a number of items relating to the Nassau County budget and five-year plan. We're also going to have an emergency item at the end dealing with a grant for the Board of Elections. Before we get into the budget items, I wanted to note for the record and present to the clerk an opinion that we have received from Dr. Martin Cantor. So I'd like to give that to the clerk. All parties here have been provided with it, and ask that it be made part of the record. We have 5 items in the calendar today, excluding the item with respect to the Board of Elections. These 5 items relate to the proposed Nassau County budget for fiscal year 2021. We are going to be jumping around the numbers because it makes more sense to do things this way. So the first thing we'll do, we'll have the budget hearing, followed by the legislative budget, followed by the county budget, then the tax levy ordinance, and finally the multi-year plan. Calendar number 1 is a public hearing on ordinance number 100 of 2020, an ordinance to adopt the Nassau County budget for the 12-month period 2021 fiscal year, beginning January 1st, 2021, and ending December 31st, 2021. Motion to open the hearing by Legislator Ford, seconded by Legislator DeRigi Witten. All in favor of opening the hearing, signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed?
Presiding Officer, if I may, I did not call Mr. Drucker. My fault.
And he's here,
Thank
too.
you. Yes.
Okay. So the hearing is now open. I guess first thing we'll do is we'll open it up to the public. We have one slip. That's from Mita J. Meriday. It is good to have you back, Mita. How are you?
Good afternoon. If the one slip can represent the many who are not able to be here for various reasons, including those who have passed on due to COVID and the mishandling of the pandemic, I'm here to speak with regard to the residents of Nassau County. Many are homeowners who want to protect their assets who are being overtaxed and receiving no services. The budget continues to dismiss the many underserved communities, particularly communities of color, veterans, our seniors, and even our young people who cannot live here because of the high cost of the taxes and the disparity in the services. The transport for those without cars is something, again, that would require an emergency grant such as the one that's going to probably be passed and is also much needed for the Board of Elections. We are not looking forward thinking, but we still have to count on you, our elected officials, who in many times have not acted as leaders for those of us who are underserved, to take on a plan that has multi-year impact on residents who are basically struggling day to day. We are concerned with regard to this still invisible, yet to be seen disparity study that just on a cursory review of the 400 pages associated with the budget is supposed to be in place now. But we wonder, how is that now going to be implemented when you have various departments, including a breakup in the diversity agencies who represent their own well-intentioned, distinguished communities, but unfortunately, even when they were collectively under the Office of Minority Affairs, they were underserved. Now you have broken up. It's about divide and conquer, which is unfortunate because everyone deserves to have an equal share in the amount of money that they pay in taxes in Nassau County, which is still estimated to be the second highest taxes in the country for the lack of resources and return that we received. We have questions, many residents, with regard to the revenue stream that we feel is unrealistic in light of the pandemic and the number of people who are losing their jobs and losing their homes, for people to assume that they're going to be the ones that are going to fortify businesses that unfortunately are operating at best at 25%. So we have questions, and we need the leadership, particularly in these underserved communities who still lack the housing problems, unaffordable housing. We do not have resources to transportation. Nassau County, as well as the town of Hempstead, has continued to provide funding to our colleges and universities. Granted, they have been lacking as well, but guess what? The parents who are struggling to keep their kids in the schools safely on the collegiate level as well as elementary schools and junior high schools, they need relief and support as well. And who is speaking for them? Again, our veterans continue to suffer. I see that you're just pretty much giving a little bit more to veteran services and the hard-working representatives at the veteran agency. But Nassau County has an extremely large number of veterans, including widows, who are not getting services and not getting supports from this auspicious body. But we will continue to do what? I guess now, unfortunately, because of the pandemic, you cannot attend all of the breakfasts and the parades that you usually use as the celebratory events in support of our veterans. So right now you have to deal with the hard realities that our veterans are suffering. Our seniors are suffering. Granted, you set up supports for them to get COVID testing in the rain in Baldwin Park when many of them had to stand outside to get those tests. But those who couldn't catch a bus, there was no bus that would take them to that facility. There was no resources for those with disabilities. But I'm pretty sure on the North Shore, you had everything that was accessible. So again, there continues to be a divide in the resources. Now, all of a sudden, Newsday wants to highlight the number of divisions that are in Nassau County that many of us have been out here expressing for years with no result and no resolve. We ask, we beg, and in some cases we demand what we are entitled to. Not the handouts, not just the free masks. We need the jobs. We need the resources. We need the contracts, okay? We don't need as many workshops to start a minority and women-owned business. People of color have been entrepreneurs for decades. We want to get our return on the investment. Thank you.
Any other member of the public like to make any comments? Do any legislators want to say anything at this time, or do you want to hold your remarks until we get to the budget and the amendments? All right, hearing none, we need a motion to close the hearing. Legislator Drucker moves to close the hearing. Legislator Walker seconds that. All in favor of closing the hearing signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Hearing is closed. Okay, now jumping to calendar, item number 4, which is ordinance number 102 of 2020, which is an ordinance to adopt the budget for the county legislature for the county of Nassau for the 12-month 2021 fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2021, and ending December 31st, 2021, and to appropriate revenues for said budget. Motion by Deputy Presiding Officer Coppell, seconded by Minority Leader Abrahams. Any debate or discussion on the legislative budget? Hearing none, I'm going to call for a vote. Again, this is the legislative budget. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Carries unanimously. Alrighty. Calendar item number 2, ordinance number 100 of 2020 is an ordinance to adopt the county budget for the 12-month 2021 fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2021 and ending December 31st, 2021. Motion to put that before us by Legislator Muley, seconded by Legislator Lafazan. So the budget, county budget, is now before us, and I'm going to describe some of the amendments that the majority is proposing. Before I do that, I'm going to note for the record that Legislator Schaefer has left the room and will not be participating in any debate or discussion with respect to the amendments to the 2021 budget that have been proposed by the majority. Okay, again, I'm going to describe the amendments that we have proposed. Sales taxes. The administration projects that sales taxes in 2021 will be down 20%. Even with concerns about possible resurgence of COVID, this projection has no basis in reality. As of the August sales tax check, Nassau sales tax revenues in 2020 are down 8.8%. Now, this 8-month period includes a 3-month period during which the shutdown was in place, in which there was minimal economic activity in Nassau. As was pointed out by the OMB during the height of the pandemic, a major driver of the decrease in sales taxes was the fact that gasoline purchases had dropped substantially. We all saw it. There were no cars on the road. And we all see it now. Traffic is back. Newsday, in fact, reported it this week. Shopping in brick and mortar stores continues to lag. However, internet shopping is up. As Dr. Marty Cantor indicates, Macy's, for example, reported a second quarter loss, but also reported more than 4 million new online shoppers. Home buying has seen explosive growth in our county and island and region. And there is economic activity that ripples from home purchases, major purchases that go with when you buy a new home, the things that you put into that home. Moody's projects a positive gross county product for 2021 of 2.7% growth. This morning it was reported that the United States gross domestic product accelerated at 33.1% annual pace in the third quarter. What about our friends to the east who are part of this economic region? Well, Suffolk County is projecting a 7.2% reduction in sales taxes for 2021. Our amendment projects a very conservative 12% reduction next year. Again, the administration has provided no explanation for its projection of 20% decrease. We cannot and should not be bound by an arbitrary projection not supported by any data. even if the worst happens this year and there was a shutdown of economic activity similar to what happened last year, this year's experience does not support a 20% reduction. Debt restructuring. The county proposes to rely on restructuring of NYFA and county debt by NYFA in the amounts of $296 million in 2021 and $163 million in 2022. We propose that the county restructure its own debt, including $115 million in 2021 and $117 million in 2022. Over the course of 15 years, this saves the county approximately $237 million. Special Reserve Fund. Let's talk about the county's refund liability. County owes $587 million in tax refunds to all of the classes combined. As of 2019, the amount owed to homeowners was roughly the same as it was 5 years ago. It was $35 million in 2019, which is about $4 million less than it was in 2015. As of 2019, the amount owed to business owners is about $50 million more than it was 5 years ago. As of 2019, this county owed $275 million in tax refunds to businesses. The county is making no progress in reducing the backlog. In 2020, the county paid $8 million in tax refunds. That's $8 million in tax refunds, again, on a $275 million in tax refunds that are owed. Out of operating, it was $150,000. The bottom line is the county owes hundreds of millions of dollars for tax refunds to businesses that are struggling because of the pandemic. As Newsday reported, many of these businesses are having difficulty paying electric bills, rent. Thousands of workers have been laid off. Many businesses are now teetering on the brink of closing for good. If the county pays these businesses what we owe them, it helps the economy. It may help some businesses survive. It means jobs. It is unconscionable that the administration proposes to do nothing about this backlog until 2023. What the county executive's budget does is gather as much cash as possible, while taking no action on the structural problems that have plagued the county for years. Once the county burns through these cash savings from restructuring, we are still going to be faced with the structural problems, tax refund liability, backloaded contracts. Our amendments create a special revenue fund to begin addressing the backlog now. All tax revenues in excess of the adopted budget are deposited into the fund for the purpose of paying down the backlog. Again, to the extent that we receive excess revenues from sales taxes, it goes into this fund, which is used to pay down the backlog to these residents and businesses. Also, if there is a pandemic relief package from the federal government, any budget line in the budget that becomes surplus as a result of receipt of federal aid gets deposited in the special revenue fund. Again, this goes to the businesses that are hurting. This goes to our residents. This is an innovative proposal to tackle a problem that has plagued this county for years. Our other amendments include the following: $4.5 million for partial restoration for bus service, $50,000 for additional staffing, each for the Minority Affairs and for the Office of Asian American Affairs, $450,000 for a county-wide rodent extermination program, $100,000 restoration for the Smart Sprinkler program. Now, this is a program whose idea was Legislator Bino. But the reason it's here and the reason it's under discussion is because Legislator Ford insisted that that money be restored. A $345,000 restoration of the District Attorney's Technology Fund, elimination of the 3.5% tax increase in the Sewer Authority and the 0.5% in the General Fund. Lastly, $168,000 for the Emergency Ambulance Bureau, which adds 4 positions as recommended by the Nassau County Ambulance Committee. So those are our amendments. Any debate or discussion? Legislator Ferretti.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Just a quick word on the amendment for the rat extermination program. As I'm sure my colleagues on the legislature would agree, rats are an issue that we're all facing in Nassau County. I'm sure I'm not the only one up here on the dais whose office is inundated with calls from residents who are experiencing these issues on their own property. This is a problem that Nassau County is not without fault. We heard from Commissioner Arnold. There is simply not enough staff at DPW to properly maintain county sumps. As a result, sumps are overgrown. We're not manicuring them routinely, and as we all know, this is a place where rats generally live. So, it's not a coincidence that the majority of the calls that I receive are from residents whose houses are in close proximity to sumps that are they're often not maintained adequately by the county. And as the county is part of the cause of this issue, I believe we need to take measures to rectify this issue. Certainly, with the economic crisis we're facing as a result of the pandemic, residents simply don't have the extra money to go hire their own exterminators. This amendment seeks to restore a program that previously existed in Nassau County and was cut under the Swazi administration. No Nassau resident should be afraid to utilize their property. Right now, people are literally terrorized by these rodents running across their feet as they sit in their backyard trying to have a family meal. This amendment is a good start. I'm not sitting here saying it's the be-all, end-all, but it's certainly a good start to tackling this very important quality of life issue that our residents are facing, and I would ask my colleagues on the legislature to support it. Thank you.
Legislator Rhodes.
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer. I'll make comments with regard to the overall budget when we take the vote, but with respect to amendments, I want to particularly address the additional funding for the Office of Minority Affairs. As the Minority Affairs Chair, we have had a series of hearings where we have, at great length, gone through the responsibilities of the Office of Minority Affairs and what they're charged to do under the Charter. It has been clear to me that office is understaffed, overworked, and does not have the personnel that it needs to be able to fulfill its responsibilities under the Charter. And I find it disturbing that the administration continues to pay lip service to these issues while taking actions that compromise that office's ability to function appropriately. The executive director of the Office of Minority Affairs was the last, out of every appointment that was made, executive appointment that was made by the administration when it came into office, the executive director of Minority Affairs was the last appointment to be made. We take a look at the budget for this year, for last year and this year. The approved budget had 10 full-time personnel and 4 part-time personnel. So a total of 14. What's actually on staff is 7. So the money that we've appropriated in previous years has not been used by the administration. So it's not the case that there isn't sufficient funds. It's not the case that that the legislature hasn't provided the office with the resources that it needs to be able to meet the needs of an important constituency in our county and important contributors to our county. It's that the executive branch has not made it a priority. And in fact, in this year's budget, we actually see a cut in staff. Our amendments are to restore one of those individual staff people, along with urging the administration to allow that office to hire, to allow that office to be able to function. And so, I again urge my colleagues, and particularly my colleagues on the Minority Affairs Committee, who have borne witness to the testimony, both from office staff and from members of our community, our constituents, who feel that office is not reaching its potential, to support all of the amendments, but particularly the amendment with respect to the Office of Minority Affairs and the Office of Asian American Affairs, to allow us to fulfill the important missions of those two agencies.
Okay, we have Legislator Ford, then Minority Leader Abrahams.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Also, in regard to the amendments, I wholeheartedly support the increase of the headcount for our medics, the police medics. This is an agency that really went above and beyond during the pandemic, handling numerous calls. Those that were sick, those who were in great need. They work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, every single day of the year. And this report, this committee that was put together, spent a lot of time on investigating the current system, coming up with recommendations, how to improve the system. I believe that the report really says, has a lot of great ideas that I look forward to having this all come to fruition. And but I believe that the first step in advancing the recommendations made by this report would be to bring to definitely increase the headcount of the number of medics. So this is why I will be supporting these amendments, because I think it's one way of saying to all of the medics that have been working so hard for all of us that we do appreciate the work that you do, and we're going to finally give you the relief that you need. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Minority Leader Abrahams.
Presiding Officer, I just
Come on, it's kind of difficult to hear right now. It's breaking up a little bit. Is Kevin here?
Can you hear me? Kevin? Hello? Hello? I'm not muted. Hello? Yeah, I'm not mute. Can you hear me? I must have a. Can I try to phone back?
We can hear you, but you're
Hello?
going in and out.
Yeah.
Seal it.
Go ahead, Kavan.
Thank you, Legislator Richie Whitten, for doing this. I don't know what's going on my internet connection, but I guess with the storm, it's probably creating some problems in terms of internet and connectivity. But first and foremost, I want to demonstrate my thank you to the county executive for leading the county through a very difficult time. And also I want to thank my colleagues in government. Even though we may have different perspectives and different points of view, I think we all try to serve on the best interest of each of our residents of Nassau County. That being said, I can't say more clearly and more emphatically that the amendments that are before us are illegal. I know this because of the case in regards to Abraham versus Mangano, or Mangano versus Abraham. It was demonstrated at that time that the legislature did not have the authority to increase revenue. That is why we felt it was prudent as well as more responsible to try to work out our amendments or our particular proposals that we wanted to see the county executive pursue. We wanted to work them out in a manner where we were able to actually get them done. Not having the true wherewithal of the budget as the county executive sees it, and understanding that this is her budget and the legislature obviously can make amendments and changes, we never felt that we had the authority, which we do feel that the majority does not have the authority, to increase revenue. That being said, as I said before, we feel that these amendments are illegal. And that being said, there is no grounds for us to move forward with these amendments unless there's a county attorney opinion that is to the contrary, which the county attorney's opinion clearly states, from our perspective, that they are illegal, as well as our understanding from the previous case of this happening several years ago. That being said, though the amendments are well and good, and under normal circumstances, they would probably receive greater consideration. We are going forward with not supporting the amendment, but at the same time, as I said before, we reached out to the county executive because we felt that some of the ideas that were percolating were important and deserved merit. Obviously, we would love to be able to try to do all of them, but during this very difficult time, it was imperative that at least the bus, the smart sprinklers, and the police medics for the ambulance bureau were definitely on our highest agenda of making sure we go forward to be able to accomplish those. Those are things that we all agree on. Our legislators have worked on the issue with the police medics, which is not new, for several months, as well as the bus and the smart sprinkler initiative. So I just want to urge the legislature to continue to, well, not continue, but review the particular matter as it pertains to Mangano versus Abraham, as well as the county attorney's opinion, which indicates that the legislature, by these amendments, by increasing the projections of sales tax, is pursuing an avenue that is illegal. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kavan. We obviously saw the county attorney's opinion. Now, county attorney is rendering an opinion that we cannot change the projection, county executive's projection as to sales taxes. Now, he's determined this based on dicta in a Supreme Court level case. Base dicta is when a court gives an opinion about an issue that's not before the court. It is absolutely not binding. He's also relying on a 1936 opinion from the 4th Department, which covers Western New York. It is also not binding on courts in where we live, which is the 2nd Department. So it's a particularly weak argument. More importantly, there's a 2nd Department case. We live in the 2nd Department by the name of Kessel versus D'Amato, which holds clearly that we do have the ability to make this change in the budget. So the county executive has presented, county executive through the county attorney has presented us with an opinion that of case law that's non-binding. And they have ignored a case that is binding here that says that we can do exactly what we're doing. I am reminded of 2 years ago when the administration attempted to block legislative actions based on a technicality. They brought a lawsuit, which they had to withdraw because they had no merit, wasting our time and taxpayers' money. And apparently, they want to go down that road again, and it looks like they're trying to do this a different way. Again, they're relying on an opinion based on non-binding case law that does not apply to these facts, and ignoring binding case law from the appellate courts in this department for their opinion. So there's no merit to that. I mean, it's a pretext to avoid voting on these, but there is absolutely no merit in what is being suggested by the county executive and the county attorney. Anyone else want to comment? Oh, I know that Legislator Bino had a question. Then we can go to responses.
Go ahead.
I just want to say one thing. You know, we're in a very difficult time, to say the least, as we all are more than aware of. And, you know, I think we have to be as fiscally conservative as possible. I happened to watch Mr. Cantor on Channel 12, and I watched him this morning, and, you know, he was discussing how, you know, once January comes and people have to pay their back rent and, you know, they might be evicted. I mean, there's so many things. 30% of the restaurants might not come back. The theater, you know, is also affecting even Nassau County. Our tourism is down. I don't know where. I mean, I want to be optimistic, but you know, I know our own comptroller mentioned that there could be anywhere from a 17 to 32% decrease in sales tax for 2020 and a 33 to 42% decrease. So maybe I'm hoping his numbers are wrong, like you're saying, and I would like to think that, you know, things will get better. We won't have a second wave, even though right now it looks like we're surrounded by a second wave at least, or their first wave, our possible second wave. I just think we have to be financially smart and conservative and err on being as careful as possible. I do think that there are different ways to go forward. I think we're going to have to do something, you know, with declaring some type of an emergency for debt refinance. You know, I know it's next year is a political year. I get it. I know, and I know what we want to do and what people want to accomplish. But the pandemic is something that is both. It's just we don't have any room for partisanship. We have to do what's right for our constituents, and many are suffering, and I think the best way to do it is give them a realistic budget so that we don't run into problems where we have a major deficit, whether for the debt refinance or spending money that we just don't think. I honestly don't think sales tax is going to be that high. If I did, I would feel better. But listening to everyone, including Mr. Cantor, just doesn't sound like it. So I would rather stay within the realm of what we can, you know, even our budget, you know, we're hoping for the best, but at least I feel more comfortable that we can come through with it. So as much as I'd like to spend money in all different areas, I'm also going to be staying with Laura Kern's budget. And we have, as Kavan said, I just hope everyone could hear him, we've discussed things with Laura Kern, and she is going to be, you know, helping in different areas, including the police medics and other immediate concerns. So, again, as much as I'd like to be as optimistic as you guys are being, we're erring on the conservative side, and I hope you're right, but right now I just don't feel it. So.
Before we move on, when you're referring to us as being optimistic, what we are projecting is a negative 12% result in 2021. In other words, we are projecting that the sales taxes are going to go down 12%, which is 3.2% more than they've gone down this year. So there is nothing optimistic about what we are projecting. That is as conservative an estimate as you're going to get. It's more than 4% over what Suffolk's projecting, and you know, we can discuss this, but there is you can provide us no data other than anecdotal statements, no data whatsoever that would support a 20% decrease. We've asked the administration, they produced nothing.
Oh, well, if you look at the Office of the Comptroller's fact sheet that they gave us when they came to testify, and again, you're being negative, but we're being more negative. You're being less negative. So, they say that the range is anywhere from 17.7% to 32.6% less in 2020. So your less negativity is less negative by about $150 million from what I understand. And that's a lot, you know, it's just a lot. And I think that we hit all the bases, and, you know, it is backed up. If you look at if you look at the report, I kind of feel that, I have a copy of it if you want it again, but the targets and the sources are shown here, and I do think that there is a risk. So again, we're a little more negative than you are, and I know you're negative, but I think that the numbers that we have are based on what the comptroller's report says, and there is a lot of data to back it up. So I feel more comfortable promising less and maybe delivering more if we're wrong.
Again, I was asking for data. We do have data that we can discuss. On our side, do we have any faith whatsoever in this controller's prognostications? No, obviously not. But again, the data is this. Somebody's got to mute themselves. For the 8 months in which we have recorded information.
If I might say something.
Wait, hold on a second, Vinny. For the 8 months that we have recorded information, real hard data for 2020, including 3 months in which this county was virtually completely locked down, we have an 8.8% reduction. So when someone says we're going to have a 30% reduction, they must believe that there's going to be a pandemic that will shut the county down for the entire year with no economic activity. There is no basis in reality for those types of projections. Again, we are projecting a 12% decrease next year, which is very conservative and which is more than what experience shows has already happened. Anyway, Legislator Muscarella.
Yeah, while I certainly respect the opinion of the county attorney and understand the position of the minority leader, it would seem to me that the county attorney's opinion is nothing more than that, just an opinion. And it seems to have lacked the citing of the case that we put forth of Kessel versus D'Amato. There are certainly distinguished attorneys on the other side of the aisle, and I would reach out to them and just say that they have the ability to take a look at the case that was cited, to review that and see whether, in fact, we do have the authority to do what we are doing today. And I would suggest to them that their legal training would certainly allow them to come to the understanding and the belief that the actions that we take here today are not, in fact, ultra-virus, but are, in fact, certainly within our powers to do so, and would urge them, with their own intelligence, to take a look at the cases and make that determination. Thank you.
Thank you. Legislator Bino.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The legalities, or the issue of legality here regarding the opinion is I think, something that we could banter back and forth about. You're stating that you have a recent opinion in our jurisdiction. I don't have that, but I have the county attorney's decision, and I'm gonna settle with that decision. But I think that we are being a bit optimistic, and I think we're not taking into consideration what effect the balloon payments will have come December 31st, 2020, when folks that have mortgages, the commercial leases, the rental payments that have to then be paid in a balloon fashion. When that issue comes to bear, I believe that sales tax will definitely be impacted by that. So unless you have some data that shows that that was considered, I think that the data would be faulty. And to the point of Minority Leader Kavan Abrahams, I'd like to also thank the county executive for working with us to make sure that, number one, the oversight that for the smart sprinklers was rectified or will be rectified in an administrative fashion. That was brought to her attention when I spoke here during the Consumer Affairs hearing, that there was in fact an error. And so there was an immediate response that it was an error and it would be rectified. And I thank her for standing publicly yesterday, making that very clear. And she also stated yesterday that the ambulances, the EMTs, that they would get their just deserves as with additional 4 hires. And she made a statement on the record. I don't think it was covered by Newsday or even by News 12. So I would ask that Katie Horse from the administration come forward and state on the record what the county executive agreed to.
Good afternoon, Katie Horse from the administration. County Executive Curran committed to funding 4 positions in the Emergency Ambulance Bureau for next year.
In addition to the 4 that are already in the,
correct.
The 5 that are already
additional,
in the
correct.
Correct. So that would bring us to a total of 9,
yes.
Which would bring us to the total that was included in the report that was compiled related to the needs of that department, correct?
I have not seen the report, so I'll trust your...
Okay.
Yes,
okay.
Yes, I believe so.
All right, thank you, Katie. So I have no question, no further comment other than to thank Legislator Ford for trying to assist in making sure that that program was funded. Say again? That's it. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Legislator Ferretti and Legislator Rhodes.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Just in response to the minority's citing of the Comptroller's projection as to sales tax, and maybe Legislator DeRidge Whitten can confirm this, I believe you're going off the Comptroller's mid-year report, right?
It's the report that he gave us, including the hypothetical for a second wave is also included. So, no, this was just handed out at the last when he presented. I have a copy.
So was that off actual numbers or was it hypothetical?
There are actual numbers here. They're saying the baseline revenues. I have all that. If you want a copy of it, I can give it to you.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I just, at this juncture, I mean, we don't need hypotheticals. We actually have the numbers, and we see that we're negative 8.8%.
Right.
So while I understand the hesitancy from the minority to agree to the 12%, if you think that that's not conservative enough, I'm just curious as to what your thoughts are on the Suffolk County projection, because you must think they're spending like drunken sailors at that.
Well, I think it's sort of, if I can answer, Presiding Officer, I think it's sort of what Legislator Bino just indicated. We've been keeping afloat partially by different, changes in law or, different mandates from the state, plus some finances that have come through the CARES Act and other acts. But, those are going to come, hopefully we'll get some more CARES Act money, but we're going to hit a cliff, I'm afraid. I don't want to be pessimistic, but, that's what all the analysts are saying. Cantor said it this morning. We're going to see it. A lot of people, a good thing is a lot of people are starting to save, too. They don't know what's going to happen with the holiday savings and all, but the indications are that people will not be spending as much. Look, this is projected. 2020, 2021 is projected for sure. And it's just a question of how risky we want to be. I understand what you're saying with, we don't have the exact, there are a lot of variables. We're in uncharted waters, but it's all the more reason, in my opinion, to be as careful as possible. Look, he's our comptroller. We've had a lot of different comptrollers, and he doesn't work by himself. He has a whole department, as well as he gets input from other departments, and they're claiming anywhere from 17.7% to 32.6% loss decrease in 2020, and 33% to 45%. Now, again, maybe he's thinking that there might be a second wave. I don't think we'd have it as bad as we did last time, as Dr. Eisenstein said. I don't think we'd have a full shutdown, but, it's something, it's real. I mean, we deal with it every day, and I feel more comfortable taking, an a more negative.
I understand your point. I would just say, you know, I feel that the projection of a 12% decrease is actually quite conservative. You know, if you look at Mr. Cantor's memo that we circulated earlier, not only does he support our projection, but he also notes that the New York State Comptroller projects a 9.5% decrease. So once again, that's even less than that's even less of a decrease than we're projecting. So if you look at what Mr. Cantor says in his memo, if you look at what the New York State Comptroller says, if you look at reality, which is that there's to date 8.8% with the worst of the pandemic already behind us, I think that if anything, our 12% reduction is overly conservative. But I respect your opinion.
Yeah,
Thank
you know, it's we're not going to know who's right and who's wrong right now. But the bottom line is, there's also a question. If you look at our charter, we're really supposed to not be the ones to determine what we anticipate for revenue. I mean, I really believe that. So I just had a quick chance to look at Mr. Cantor's report, and I saw that, you know, through September 11, 2020, there was a decline of 21.8%. And now it's coming down to 8.8%. But, you know, we're going into the flu season, the winter months. You know, we all know that there was hopefully a break during the summer. But now that we're coming back, you know, to an area where people are, you know, in closer, you know, they're proximate to each other and they're indoors, you know, it's a question. So, again, we're not going to know who's right at this point, but I trust the way that they've looked at it with the Comptroller's office, and we're not, as legislators, we're really not supposed to be the ones who determine revenue. I mean, it's just not. It's, if you look at the charter, we're not. That's not our job. We're supposed to go by, you know, the recommendations of the various financial offices. So,
well, Legislator Hewitt, I would respectfully disagree with your interpretation of the charter. I would certainly disagree with the opinion of the county attorney. I think it's absolutely our role, if the sales tax projection is way out of whack, which quite frankly I think it is our role to bring a realistic projection into the budget, and that's what we're looking to do. It's completely legal, and quite frankly I was shocked to read the opinion by the county attorney, which after 5 minutes of legal research we were able to find a appellate division case that actually is binding in this district, which completely thwarted that opinion.
all right, so we'll agree to disagree right now.
Well, the wonderful, thank you, Presiding Officer. The great thing about this is that we don't have to agree to disagree. And I would suggest that perhaps the county attorney come down here to explain why the case of Kessel v. D'Amato, 72 Appellate Division 2nd, 790, 2nd Department case from 1979 does not apply here. The cases that are cited, or the case that is cited, relies upon, by the county attorney, relies upon a 4th Department decision really stemming out of the City of Buffalo. The City of Buffalo's authorizing charter does not contain the same language that Section 305 of our charter does. Specifically, the language in the City of Buffalo's charter does not include the language inserting any additional item. It simply talks about increasing items of appropriation. And so based upon that language within the City of Buffalo statute, the 4th Department made the determination that the City of Buffalo, the legislature of the City of Buffalo, did not have the power to be able to change the budget to increase or revisit any item of revenue coming into the county. Our charter, Section 305, indicates that we have the ability to insert any additional item. And the case Kessel v. D'Amato, which we've alluded to from the 2nd Department, which is controlling in our jurisdiction, in this case, the Nassau County Board of Supervisors, this is from 1979, but predated the legislature, and as you know, we sort of stepped into the shoes of the Board of Supervisors, amended the proposed county budget to increase estimates of revenue. The petitioner, Richard Kessel in this case, challenged the action on the basis that amending the budget in such a manner required a separate hearing. The court, the 2nd Department, held that the Board of Supervisors, pursuant to the plain language of Section 305 of the Charter, the Nassau County Charter, was fully empowered to amend the proposed budget to increase an estimate of revenue under the language insert any additional item without further public hearings, subject to some conditions which obviously have been met. The case law is clear, and if the county attorney's opinion is the reason that the minority won't consider the amendments that are being brought forth, and particularly the change in projection of sales tax revenue. If that's the reason that the minority is not considering that, I would suggest that the county attorney come down here having read Kessel v. D'Amato, because I would suggest that common sense and the training of any lawyer would require the county attorney to change his opinion in light of that controlling legal authority, which is directly on point in this case. So, I don't have the ability to invite the county attorney down here, and perhaps the presiding officer will, but I would love to see if the county attorney sticks by his opinion in light of this case, especially since it's directly relevant to what we're discussing today. There is neither the state comptroller, the Suffolk County, or any of our neighboring jurisdictions are projecting a 20% decrease in sales tax revenue. We've made that the case clearly that common sense simply dictates that with us having dealt with an 8.8% decrease in sales tax revenue in 2020 at the height of the pandemic, there is no justification to project a decrease in revenue of 20.5%. It simply doesn't make sense. It's simply not an accurate reflection of reality. In fact, our neighbors were lumped in with Suffolk County as a region, as you well know. And that's because in Suffolk County they're dealing with similar numbers of COVID. They have a similar population. The effects upon their economy have been virtually the same as the effects on our economy, yet County Executive Ballone in his 2021 budget projects a decrease in sales tax revenue of only 7.2%. So in effect, I mean, if County Executive Ballone is listening, in effect, what our county executive is suggesting and what the minority is apparently suggesting in going with a 20.5% number is that County Executive Ballone is reckless and irresponsible in his projections of revenue. What we're asking our minority colleagues to do and asking the county executive to do is to accept a 12% number, which is vastly more conservative than Suffolk County's numbers, but more reflects what we believe the reality is going to be. As Legislator Dirigi Whitten had mentioned, this is our budget is about choices, and our budget is about doing the right thing by the taxpayers of Nassau County. And doing the right thing by the taxpayers of Nassau County is not well served by having inaccurate estimates of revenue for the benefit of padding next year's budget in an election year, right?
Can I
So the bottom line is, we want to be as accurate as possible.
Right.
We want to have realistic estimates, and we don't want to have to rely upon borrowing to be able to fund county expenses.
Correct.
And the reality is that. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Presiding Officer.
Okay, no, I would just tell Legislator Dirigi Whitten that there are other two legislators who want to go. So
Okay, if I could just do one real quick.
No, I mean, I don't. I mean, he hasn't called you by name, so basically, I think I'd like these other people waiting patiently.
Right.
Yes.
So, the reality is the county executive has presented us a budget that is that borrows more than we need at rates that are substantially higher than we need to pay. And so the question becomes why. We have an additional $285 million in debt that the county is incurring that the county does not have to incur. And because we have an election to go through NYFA as opposed to financing the money on our own through the county's own auspices, we are actually paying a higher rate in order to be able to do that when you factor in the costs of NYFA. As it stands right now, NYFA is set to sunset in 2025, right? And this borrowing, 15-year borrowing of $285 million more than we need to borrow, is actually going to have NYFA be around until at least 2035. So it's adding another 10 years to that factor. And if you take a look at the cost of NYFA restructuring versus the cost of county restructuring, by going with our plan and doing this through the county and borrowing less, we are actually saving taxpayers almost $240 million over the course of the next 15 years. So if we're talking about having a budget that is in the best interest of our constituents, the best interest of our constituent is having less debt, less expense, putting $237, almost $238 million into the pocket of county taxpayers as opposed to paying it in debt service and expenses for NIFA, which, you know, I mean, let's say what NIFA is. NIFA is supposed to be the fiscal watchdog, but how careful the watchdog is in guarding our finances seems to be based upon the party affiliation of the county executive that happens to be in power. You know, this borrowing and this budget does nothing to protect county taxpayers. What it does is protect jobs at NIFA. It protects and it pads the budget so that the numbers next year will look better. And in the process, it's saddling taxpayers with almost $240 million of additional debt and additional expense that it does not have to incur. The adjustments in sales tax revenue we have spoken about already, but the 12% figure certainly is realistic and is more reflective of reality. But equally important to that is something that the presiding officer mentioned in creating the Special Revenue Fund. Nassau County owes, I believe it's almost $580 million to residents and to commercial property owners and to utilities in Nassau County. That's over $500 million that we're paying 9% interest on, not we. The taxpayers of Nassau County are paying interest on that really is their own money. There's been nothing laid out in this budget that even approaches a plan as to how we're going to put that money back into the pockets of our taxpayers. You know, the bottom line is we are dealing with a pandemic, you know, but instead of using the pandemic as an excuse, we should be using the pandemic as an opportunity for us to take steps towards putting money back into their pockets to help stimulate our local economy. And the creation of a special revenue fund does exactly that. If the projected sales tax revenue comes in greater than we've expected, put that into the special fund. If we actually receive additional, well, there are limits on what we can spend on CARES Act, but if we receive additional federal assistance, put that into the special revenue fund and at least create a path to be able to put some of the money back into the taxpayers' pockets so that they can use it to support their own businesses, they can use it to support their own households, and they can use it to support our local economy, which will help us survive whatever may come. You know, I think it's a smart plan that that is truly what serves our taxpayers well. The other thing I think that, and this is some of what I was going to mention on the actual budget vote, what we've presented, and while the administration has apparently agreed to some of the changes, and I already spoke about the Office of Minority Affairs, Legislator Ford has already spoken about the importance of having additional personnel in our ambulance bureau. Legislator Ferretti has already spoken about the county's really obligation that it's been negligent on in addressing the rodent problem that we have in some areas of the county. We've passed a budget, or will pass today, a budget with our amendments that is in balance. And so when the county executive vetoes that budget, which he has promised to do, there's going to be a problem. There's going to be a $285 million hole that as soon as that veto is signed, that's going to be blown in this budget. And that $285 million hole that's blown in the budget, there's only a handful of ways to fill it. Either you're going to have to increase taxes by roughly 10% to make up the hole, you're going to have to engage in $500 million of borrowing to plug that hole, or you're going to have to rely upon massive cuts. So while it's easy to say you're going to veto something, and it's easy for colleagues on the other side to say that they're going to back up the county executive on that veto, there are consequences to that decision, consequences that the county executive is going to have to face, and consequences that this legislature is going to have to face. When we're passing a balanced budget that is responsible, that addresses the needs of taxpayers now, I would think long and hard before we disturb that in favor of a budget that actually borrows more than we have to and causes taxpayers to pay in the long term and the short term more than they need. Thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer.
Okay, we have several legislators that will go in this order. Deputy Presiding Officer Coppell, Legislator Ford, Legislator DeRiggi Whitten, and Minority Leader Abrahams.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'm not going to go over ground that's already been covered on both sides. In other words, the reasonableness of the projection of 12% versus 20% versus what the actual experience has been. I think everybody's beaten that one to death. Nor do I think it's going to be productive for me to talk about the merits of the legal opinion on either side. We here are not going to figure that one out. We're not going to make any decisions on that. That'll have to be worked out one way or another by other people. But what I would like to simply do is perhaps advance a few observations. The first one is that if this legislature cannot go ahead and render its opinion as to the validity of the budget and the projections upon which it's based, then what are we doing here altogether? We have no role. At that point, we're simply cut off from the entire process, and we just have no reason to be sitting here now. We're just a debating society, if that's the case. The second thing that I would like to point out is that just as a matter of fact, the economy is doing well, and for that, the reason I mentioned that, we had a report just this morning, I think, that we advanced a 33% rate on an annual basis in the third quarter. I don't think that there's a reason for pessimism, and the reason I mention that is that borrowing a large amount now through NIFA might be irresponsible if we don't need it. We can always borrow more in 2021 should it prove to be necessary. Should we have borrowed too little now, we can always borrow more later instead of taking this giant slug of money now that we may not need. I think we can all agree that we might not need it. We all hope that we might not need it. And the Federal Reserve has promised to keep rates at rock bottom for an extended period, certainly through 2021, and we should know what's going on by then. So I think that, as I say, borrowing that much now would be irresponsible on several grounds. First of all, we're going to be paying interest on funds that we may not need. Second of all, what we'd be doing, as proposed by the county executive's budget, is we would be potentially extending the life of NIFA for a long time. I would remind everyone that we here were elected to run the county together with the county executive. NIFA was not, and that's kind of abdicating a large part of our job. We would like to, I think all of us probably should like to, get rid of NIFA just at the earliest possible date. And this would be going along with the proposal by the county executive would run counter to that desire and that imperative, which, as I say, I think we all agree. Thank you.
Legislator Ford.
Thank you very much. I just want to clarify, I guess the comment that Legislator DeRiggi Whitten, she referenced to Dr. Cantor in his opinion on the sales tax revenue, and she just gave a little blip, and I just want to make sure that his full opinion of this will be read into the record. He indicated, because she had indicated that he said that we would have a shortfall of 21.8% and left it at that. But in the sentence, it says, the Nassau County Office of Legislative Budget Review, in its review of the fiscal year 2021 budget, quantified the financial damage from the COVID-19 reporting that the average sales tax remitted to Nassau County during the pandemic through September 11, 2020 declined by 21.8%. However, as the economy opened up and people and businesses went back to work, sales tax revenues have increased. as of the October 9, 2020 sales tax check covering sales tax revenues between June 1st, 2020 to August 31st, 2020 year-to-date sales tax revenues, inclusive of the sales tax collected during the pandemic, improved to being down by 8.8% year-to-date. Improving sales tax revenue is a trend that can continue as Long Islanders shop online, a growing component of retail industry sales. Dr. Cantor further says, with sales tax increasing and with expectations for gradual growth, our 2021 Nassau County sales tax base that is budgeted at 12% less than the 2020 budget as projected by OLBR, combined with a projected 1.5% growth rate for fiscal year 2021 as proposed by the Nassau County Office of Management and Budget, is reasonable. So just to let you know that I think that I agree with my friends here on the majority side, that I think that we are being conservative with our projected sales tax, that it would be declined by 12% during 2021. And I think that when he wrote these decisions, he didn't do it in a bubble, you know, and I know that we referenced his comments today in regard to the end of this year, in regard to like people whose mortgage payments may be coming due, rents and whatever. I think that this was based as he looked at all of the economics that were occurring here in the county and elsewhere. And I just want to say, too, that I know that we have concern, and I do. I like to try to remain conservative in our spending, and I agree with Legislator Coppell that we shouldn't be borrowing if we don't have to. You know, anybody who runs a household knows that when you have to, like, really trim, you know, you really should take a look at what you are really bringing in as debt and what you're going to have to pay back in the future. And when we also look at the home sales that have been occurring in Nassau and Suffolk County, we have seen an unprecedented growth in the number of house sales, the actual cost of the houses, the sales prices of the houses that are being sold. So we have a lot more people moving into this county from New York City, and I also believe that they will increase our sales tax base because they're going to have to buy furniture, do a lot of renovations. We also see the Long Island Railroad has indicated that ridership is down dramatically. And I think that is attributed to the fact that so many more people are staying at home. They're working from their homes, and I think that that also can be a contributor to sales tax revenue. If you're working from home, you're buying your lunch in your local deli, you're going to your own local supermarket, you're spending your money here within your hometowns in Nassau County rather than spending it in Manhattan, Queens, Brooklyn, wherever else you may be working, because you are not going there to work. So, so I think that our amendments and the budget that we're proposing, the amendments that we're proposing, does fulfill a conservative estimate and nothing rather optimistic at all, but just something that's very realistic. Thank you.
Okay, Legislator DeReggie Whitten, and then Minority Leader Abrahams, and that with the end.
Oh, and Arnie.
And Legislator Drucker.
I'm sorry, Legislator Drucker. And I don't know where Legislator Rhodes is, but from, again, I think I'm getting the feeling that we all want to do the right thing, and that's a nice feeling. And for the first time, I'm actually really hoping you guys are right with these numbers. I mean, I just don't feel as optimistic, but I hope you're right. But from what I understand with NYFA, if we're not borrowing, we're refinancing basically, which is we already have that debt. But by refinancing, NYFA would, if we use the NYFA loan, we would get lower interest rates. But NYFA would not stay on longer necessarily as an oversight committee. It's not connected to this refinancing, them staying on. Right now, yes, they're an oversight board. I get that. We don't, you know, I know we want to be on our own. I have mixed feelings. Sometimes I think it's good to have other eyes look at it, but it shouldn't interfere with them being complete, hopefully, in 2025. The refinance does not demand that they come in as an oversight board. So let's just, like, you know, just make sure about that. If you guys want to research that, that would be fine. The other thing that Legislator Bino and I both wanted to mention, we have reached out to the to both Minority Affairs Office as well as the Asian they actually said it on the record at the last meeting, that they have enough right now to do what they have to do. You know, they're operating, you know, of course everyone would love more money. I'm not here to say that they wouldn't take more money, and they deserve more money, but they're saying that they have enough. So what is the best way to go about this? I personally think, as just somebody who does their own budget, we're better off listening to the financial experts and using, you know, the county experts who have done this for years, somewhere around their number. And if we're wrong and the numbers come in better and there's no second wave and this whole thing of January 1st isn't a major impact, then that will be wonderful, and we can go ahead and adjust our spending at that point. But the other last quote is, I personally am more weighing my decision on that of the financial people that I trust, more so than even the question as to whether or not we have the ability to determine what sales tax will be as a legislature. So.
Okay. Minority Leader Abrahams.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can everyone hear me now? Is this better?
Yes.
Oh, good. So, just again to respond to two things that came up as it pertains to the legal case, and then I would ask that we call the vote and we move on if we can. But just two things. One, as it pertains to the Magano versus Abrahams, all the merits that have been described and mentioned on the floor today were the same things that were brought up during that case. And it was our legal impression as understanding that we did not have the legal authority to raise revenue as it pertains to the county budget. But I'll leave that as it may. Strong minds can agree, disagree. Second, as it pertains to the D'Amato versus D'Amato case, it was our understanding that that case was really strictly tied to whether or not the Board of Supervisors had to call a hearing in order to be able to raise revenue. It wasn't. It really wasn't tied to the actual increasing of revenue. And from our understanding, that's was the case of whether or not they had to hold a public hearing to be able to increase the estimate on revenue. So I just want to make sure we're going forward with all the information that is clear, so that we do not think that we're under any other misunderstandings. That being said, as I said before, they started out, I would think that we should just call the vote. Us going back and forth on legal opinions, I'm sure you have your attorneys, we have ours. Ours have advised us that this particular matter, as well as the county attorney's opinion, is proceeding in an illegal matter. You could choose to accept that or not accept it, but at this point, it sounds like you're not going to accept it. So let's just move on. We're ready to call the vote. We've debated this a lot. We're going to debate it, continue going into next year. COVID is not going anywhere from that standpoint. So let's continue. Let's just move on.
Okay, just one brief point in that Kessel versus D'Amato case. Yes, the question of a hearing was an issue, but the holding was that you needed to have a hearing, or whether you or not you needed to have a hearing before the legislative body raised revenue. Then it presupposes that you have the ability to raise revenue. Otherwise, there's no case. There's no question whether you have a hearing or not. But again, if whether or not you need to have a hearing is an issue as to whether you can raise revenue, then you have to have the ability to raise revenue. So therefore, the case clearly stands on all fours on what we're doing today. Legislative Drucker.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Like the Minority Leader said, there's no point in going back and forth on this. I think one thing that we've learned from this hearing that we can both sides can agree upon is that we're both basing our conclusions on projections. And projections can be skewed in either way. You know, one thing that we can all agree upon, I think, with regard to COVID, is that it's unpredictable. That's one lesson we've seen since the outset. It is unpredictable. And I think what is rather telling and important to note, quite recently, and in Legislator Coppell's district, the village of Lawrence has shut down again. They shut down. That's what I read. I heard that they have shut down their businesses. Isn't that correct, Legislator Coppell?
Actually, that was about a couple of weeks ago, and I think the county executive has just, I think yesterday, the day before, declared that there's been remarkable, I think was the word she used, progress over there, and things are looking up.
My point is
And
that...
that is, by the way, in what you've done now, is you've tried to make a generalization
Let me just
out
finish
of
my
the place
comment.
that by far has been the worst in the county.
My point is that the COVID-19 is unpredictable. And there's no one that can say as a matter of fact or certainty through science or otherwise that the surges that we're seeing in the infection rate all over could not possibly result in a major spike necessitating the shutdown of businesses again. God forbid that happens. None of us want to see that, but it could. And if that happens, then all of these projections about sales tax revenue go out the window. So I think it is a rather slippery slope, dangerous, to project sales tax revenue above and beyond what is considered a conservative approach, which is what the county executive has taken. I think that is the prudent course of action that we are doing, what we're pursuing here, and that has to be very much on everyone's mind. We don't want to be able to have to be in a situation next spring or whatever because of a possible shutdown where now we have this huge deficit and now we have to make drastic emergency cuts and perhaps even layoffs. Nobody wants to see that. So why not take a conservative approach now and go forward in that respect? That's the prudent course of action. Thank you very much.
Okay, all right. Right, so we've had all the debate and discussion we've had needed at this point. In terms of the amendments, we need a motion second, moved by Legislator Gaylor, seconded by Legislator Rhodes. We've had the debate and discussion. As to the amendments, Mr. Pulitzer, please call the roll.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Deputy Presiding Officer Howard Copel.
Yes.
Alternate Presiding Officer Denise Ford.
Yes.
Legislator Sela Bino. Legislator Carrier Solage.
No.
Legislator Deborah Muley.
No.
Legislator C. William Gaylor III.
Yes.
Legislator Vincent Muscarella. Legislator Vincent Muscarella.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. Legislator Eldon Birnbaum.
No.
Legislator Delia DeRiggi Whitten. Legislator James Kennedy.
Yes.
Legislator Thomas McKevitt.
Yes.
Legislator Laura Schaefer.
She's recused herself.
Legislator John Ferretti.
Yes.
Legislator Arnold Drucker.
No.
Legislator Rosemarie Walker. Legislator Joshua Lafazan.
No.
Legislator Stephen Rhodes.
I reached the same conclusions as Dr. Cantor, the director of the Long Island Center for Socioeconomic Policy, who says that, in my opinion, after reviewing the Declaration of Need ordinance pursuant to the Nassau Interim Finance Authority Act, the filed ordinances to adopt the 2021 Nassau County budget and fixing the 2021 tax rates and levying taxes, and documents provided by the Nassau County Legislature's Office of Budget Review, Nassau County's financial advisor, PFM Financial Advisors, LLC, and the Nassau Interim Finance Authority, the adjustments of the legislative majority delegation for the 2021 Nassau County budget ordinance saves Nassau County taxpayers millions of dollars in debt service payment and NIFA costs, changes the structure of how certiorari settlements and judgments are paid, and begins the ending of NIFA's involvement in Nassau County finances. I vote in favor of the amendments.
Minority Leader Kavan Abrahams.
No.
Presiding Officer Richard Nicolello.
Yes.
Okay. believe we have a vote of 10 to 8, yes versus no's. That is correct.
That's correct. So the budget amendments pass. We move on to now that the budget has been amended, we have to vote on the budget itself as amended. So I'm going to, I don't believe we need a separate roll call for that. All those in favor of the budget as amended signify by saying aye. Aye. Oh. Yeah, so based on what I heard, we have 10 votes in the affirmative. All those opposed to the budget as amended signify by saying nay.
Nay.
Okay, so the amended budget passes by a vote of 10 to 8. Please invite Legislator Schaefer back into the room. All right, calendar number 3 is an ordinance number 101 of 2020 is an ordinance fixing the tax rates and levying taxes for the 12-month 2021 fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2021 and ending December 31st, 2021. We need a motion and a second. That would be Legislator McKevitt moves that item. Legislator Walker seconds it. So the item is before us. Any debate or discussion on the ordinance fixing tax rates? We have to amend it. So we're going to make a motion to amend the ordinance, so I guess in compliance with the amendments that were recently passed, were just passed by the majority. So Legislator Gaylor makes a motion to amend the ordinance, seconded by Legislator McKevitt. Any debate or discussion on the amendment to the ordinance? Again, this is not the ordinance itself. We're voting on the amendment. Hearing none, all in favor of the amendments signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed?
Nay.
Okay, the ordinance is amendments pass. So now you have the amended ordinance fixing tax rates and levying taxes. That item is before us. All right. So that the amended ordinance is before us. Let's vote on that. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed?
Nay.
All right. That ordinance, as amended, also passes by a vote of 10 to 8. Last item is calendar number. Correct. Thank you very much. That was 11 to 8. Last item is calendar number 5, resolution number 145 of 2020. It's a resolution to adopt a multi-year financial plan for fiscal years 2021 to 2024. Need a motion on the 5-year plan moved by Legislator Drucker, seconded by Legislator Kennedy. Any debate or discussion on the 5-year plan? Hearing none, all in favor of the 5-year plan signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passes unanimously. Now I need a motion to adjourn. Oh, you're right. I was right. All right. Not yet. We're not going to adjourn yet. We have one emergency item. I will call the emergency 332 of 2020 is the clerk item. It's an ordinance supplemental to the annual appropriation ordinance in connection with the Board of Elections. We need a motion to establish the emergency, moved by Legislator McKevitt, seconded by Legislator Drucker. In terms of establishing the emergency, all those signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Okay, the emergency is established. And actually, we'll call the item as well at this point. 332 of 2020, an ordinance supplemental to the annual appropriation ordinance in connection with the Board of Elections. Moved by Ellen Birnbaum, seconded by Legislator Mascarella. So the item is now before us.
Good afternoon, legislators. This item is approximately $2.2 million received from Centertech and Civic Life. It's to offset some of the growing election costs that are as a result of this year's election, and the money will be received within 2 days from the passage of this, and they can spend it rather quickly. So In light of a lot of expenses being incurred over there currently, this will help us immensely. So,
Okay. Any discussion, debated discussion? Any public comments?
Meta Meriday, Baldwin resident. I agree that in light of the developments and the increased outreach and efforts much needed for this upcoming election, I would be in support of this emergency. I'm just hoping that there is going to be an audit process and review of how exactly these funds are going to be spent when, again, we have communities that have been impacted and they continue to not receive the resources and support as well as the people power to ensure that this election process is going to be held with all of the standards and protocols that it deserves, that the community. And also just wanted to address the fact that we can create these emergencies and find money for these types of endeavors, but we continue to, once again, in the passage of this budget and the revenues that still seem to escape many of the taxpayers and residents who are fighting on a day-to-day basis where these funds are going to come from. I'm just concerned about where we are getting these funds from, if it's going to be removed from vital services or the limited vital services that the underserved communities are receiving. So it just makes us more conscious of the fact that we are looking for our elected officials to represent our interests, and unfortunately that does not seem to be the case. So it is hopeful for those of us who are not able to be here because they're either working 2 or 3 jobs or just trying to find another job, or they're trying to provide caregiving services for their loved ones, or they're trying to find transportation because of budget cuts or reassignment of funds in other areas, or they're also just trying to survive in general with regard to this pandemic, that we are making sure that the election and all representatives involved with the process make it as safe and accessible for all involved, particularly those with disabilities, because again, we're all aware of the long lines that the news is featuring on a regular basis, but it just seems that the communities of color continue to be underserved in the resources and accessibility to polling and to elections, and this is definitely a disservice to all of them in these communities where many of our seniors, many of our underserved veterans do exist, and they're not being heard. Again, their voices are not being heard in this county, and that, to me, in this era, in this time period that we're living in, continues to be a challenge, and it's something that I am hoping that we don't have to continue to do one and dones with these elections, that you all can work together, become more bipartisan, and address the fact that too many of us are dying unnecessarily, too many of us are becoming unemployed, too many of us are fighting foreclosures, and we continue to hear the same things going back and forth in this local body. We need to come together. And the fact that we cannot bring these things to a positive and proactive resolution is very, very disconcerting for those of us that continue to work out here on these front lines as best as we can in this economy with very few resources, because many of us don't have the political connections to get the jobs and to get all of the amenities that many of these grants and emergency resources can supplement. So I'm just hoping that you are hearing the voice of your constituents, because many of you are not responding to the many calls that you claim in your testimonies that you are receiving. I, for one, can attest to that. So if you're talking about all these people who are reaching out to you, I think you might want to respond to them to actually hear what they are saying and understand that they are suffering and that they need to be addressed. Because if we're all in this together, then we all need to roll up our sleeves, dig a little deeper, suffer maybe a little more so that everybody, all ships, can possibly rise. So again, I am in support of this amendment, but I am concerned because of the number of potentially politically connected individuals with the Board of Elections, how they are benefiting while other departments and agencies that also can use emergencies, as I said, like transportation and our veteran supports and our emergency preparedness, continue to be without. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's call for a vote. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Okay, that passes. Now we need a motion to adjourn. Legislator Bino moves to adjourn, seconded by Legislator Rhodes. All in favor of adjourning signify by saying aye. Those opposed?
Aye.
We are now adjourned.